December 14th, 2023, 10 a.m. In the heart of the capital, police revealed what they called one of the most significant drug busts in recent years. It wasn't just about cocaine or cash, it was about two men who believed they were kings. One flaunted stacks of money through encrypted phones, convinced no one could ever touch him. The other filmed himself bragging he was the Pablo of East London, certain the streets belonged to him. But arrogance has a price, and when the walls closed in, their empires crumbled faster than they ever imagined. This is the story of London's arrogant dealers, and how their empires came crashing down. Welcome to UK Crime Documentaries. Let's get straight into the case. Helios Nanaj's story doesn't begin with cocaine shipments or encrypted devices. It begins years earlier, long before he was called a kingpin or the chief organizing mind of a nationwide drug network. Born in Albania, Nanaj entered the United Kingdom as a teenager under desperate and uncertain circumstances. At just 15 years old, he was smuggled into the country, hidden in the back of a lorry. It was a dangerous journey that many take seeking opportunity, safety, or escape. But for Nanaj, that path soon veered into organized crime. In later years, he would boast openly that he had been involved in criminality for nearly 2 decades, an admission that would hang over him when he finally faced justice. At first glance, his outward life gave little away. He presented himself as a construction laborer, someone blending into London's working class. But investigators would later reveal that this was nothing more than a disguise, a thin cover for the scale of the empire he was quietly building. Behind the scenes, Nanaj was moving in different circles. Step by step, he built connections within the Albanian and London underworlds, earning a reputation as someone ambitious, disciplined, and ruthless enough to scale the hierarchy. We will talk about his entire drug operation in a few minutes. By his mid-30s, Nanaj had transformed from a teenager without papers into a man with access to international supply lines. This wasn't the typical story of a dealer climbing the ranks slowly. Nanaj's rise was powered by arrogance and calculated ambition. He believed he could outsmart law enforcement, and he flaunted his success in subtle yet dangerous ways. To some, he was a family man with a young son. To others, he was a businessman who enjoyed the finer things in life. But to the authorities, he would soon be revealed as one of the most significant drug importers operating in the UK. By the time police began looking in his direction, Helios Nanaj had already laid the foundations of a multi-million-pound cocaine empire, an empire that would soon unravel, piece by piece. Behind closed doors, Nanaj was no ordinary dealer. Police later estimated that his network had moved between 0.5 ton and 3/4 ton of cocaine into the United Kingdom, a staggering amount worth millions on the street. His operation was meticulous. Using a network of couriers, safe houses, and trusted lieutenants, Nanaj ensured that drugs arrived from international suppliers and were funneled across Britain. From London, he established pipelines that reached into regions such as Gloucestershire, where local dealers kept the flow alive. Couriers transported drugs concealed in vehicles, often carrying multiple kilos at a time, while others handled the dirty work of cash collection. Nanaj could arrange shipments of 200 kilos at a time, according to investigators, something very few people in the UK drug market had the power to do. His standing in the criminal underworld was so high that even police admitted there were likely few, if any, worked like him. But the business wasn't only about moving products, it was also about the life that came with it. When officers later raided his home in Wandsworth, they found designer clothes and shoes worth around £40,000, alongside evidence of luxury cars and expensive watches. A single Rolex alone was worth close to £10,000. To Nanaj, the empire wasn't just about money, it was about status. His arrogance went further than supplying cocaine. He positioned himself as a guide for other rising traffickers, showing them how to construct their own import operations. He was no longer simply involved in crime, he was shaping it. By 2020, Helios Nanaj had carved out a place as one of the most powerful cocaine traffickers in Britain. But the same arrogance that allowed him to flaunt his wealth and confidence would soon open the cracks that law enforcement needed to bring him down. For years, Helios Nanaj operated in the shadows, convinced that his communication lines were untouchable. The heart of his confidence lay in an EncroChat device many criminals across Europe believed was impenetrable. For Nanaj, it became the command center of his empire. Under the alias Boboku, the same affectionate nickname he used for his 5-year-old son, Nanaj advertised himself as a wholesale supplier. To him, the handle was just another layer of protection. But to investigators, it became the key that unlocked his identity. The phone contained family photos, birthday messages signed by the Nanaj family, and other fragments of his personal life. He sent images of piles of cash, stacks of cocaine packages, and even selfies in designer clothes and sunglasses. He complained about having £1.6 million in cash stashed during lockdown, money he couldn't safely move abroad. In another message, he admitted to supplying over 500 kilos of cocaine and even used the devices to coach other dealers. What we have already discussed earlier. But Nanaj didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. In May 2020, a joint operation led by Europol and the National Crime Agency cracked EncroChat, and it suddenly became a goldmine of evidence for law enforcement. Every encrypted message from Nanaj was now stored in the hands of investigators. In his arrogance, he had left a digital diary of his empire, and it was only a matter of time before those messages would bring it crashing down. Helios Nanaj's empire did not collapse overnight. It began with what seemed like a small arrest, one that would set off a chain reaction leading straight back to him. In May 2020, Gloucestershire police arrested Dimitri Genie, a local dealer who had been supplying cocaine in the Gloucester area. At the time of his arrest, Genie was caught with 2 kilograms of cocaine and around £60,000 in cash. On its own, it looked like another mid-level dealer being taken off the streets, but detectives noticed something else in Genie's possession that would change the course of the entire case. An EncroChat encrypted phone. This device turned out to be the crucial link. When law enforcement cracked into it, investigators discovered it wasn't just used for local sales. It was connected to someone much higher in the chain. The digital trail led them to an upstream supplier who operated far beyond the streets of Gloucester, and that supplier was Helios Nanaj. The timing was significant. At the very same time, EncroChat had been decrypted, allowing investigators to see the complete history of Nanaj's handle too. From there, detectives painstakingly pieced the puzzle together. They didn't just rely on the content of the messages, they combined them with cell site analysis and ANPR camera data. By tracking how Nanaj's EncroChat device and his personal phone always connected to the same locations, whether at home in Wandsworth or traveling by car, they were able to prove both belonged to him. Among the logs was one chillingly ironic message. Nanaj had warned associates that he was pausing shipments into Gloucester because the area was too hot with police activity. He had no idea how accurate that assessment was. Local arrests, his own EncroChat messages, combined with international cooperation, were already closing the net around him. When officers finally executed warrants, the picture of his double life became clear. Inside his Wandsworth apartment, they uncovered signs of luxury we already have discussed. More evidence from the seized devices confirmed what investigators had already uncovered in the decrypted EncroChat messages. Nanaj's involvement in hundreds of kilos of cocaine, along with his desperate attempts to move vast sums of money abroad. What started with 1 dealer and 2 kilograms of cocaine had escalated into the largest drugs prosecution Gloucestershire police had ever seen. And at the top of that chain stood Helios Nanaj, about to face the full weight of the law. But while one empire was collapsing under the weight of evidence, another story was unfolding in East London. One built not on silence, but on arrogance broadcast for all to see. In the crowded streets of East London, where drug networks shift and evolve with ruthless competition, Shahan Ahmed carved out his identity not through silence and secrecy, but through sheer arrogance. At 34 years old, living on Stevedore Street in Wapping Tower Hamlets, he wanted to be seen, heard, and remembered. Unlike other dealers who thrived in anonymity, Ahmed reveled in attention. He filmed himself bragging, telling anyone who would listen that he was Pablo, a nod to the infamous Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar. In his mind, he wasn't just another London dealer. He was the one who controlled the streets, the one whose name carried weight across East London, and he even called himself East London's finest, not in whispers, but on recordings later recovered by police. But the reality was far smaller than the image he built. Ahmed didn't run global cartels or command billions. He operated a network of 3 drug lines, and we will talk about it in a few minutes. Still, within that narrower reach, he made himself a presence. Police would later uncover over £600,000 hidden through business accounts, evidence of the profits he was quietly amassing. And yet, what set Ahmed apart wasn't only the money or the drugs, it was the ego. His fascination with Escobar wasn't just about wealth, it was about power, image, and legacy. He wanted to be feared, but more than that, he wanted to be known. In his own words, Ahmed claimed he had spent 10 years in the gutter, on a curfew, and still rolling like Pablo. He saw himself as a survivor, a man who had risen from hardship to become untouchable. But in boasting so openly, he drew the very attention that careful traffickers avoid at all costs. Beneath the boasting, it was the 3 drug lines that powered Shahan Ahmed's empire. Branded under the name Killer, these lines formed the backbone of his network, operating steadily from December 2021 through June 2022. In London's underground drug economy, these lines are everything. They act as the point of contact between addicts or users and suppliers, creating a system where customers simply call or text and drugs are delivered. Ahmed definitely wasn't standing on street corners. He was running a small but sophisticated distribution model. The operation focused heavily on Tower Hamlets and East London, areas already struggling with entrenched drug markets. By keeping the lines active day and night, Ahmed ensured a constant flow of heroin and crack cocaine into the community. It was this steady rhythm that gave the illusion of stability and power he so often boasted about. Each line was essentially a business on its own. The phones were passed between trusted associates who knew their role. With 3 separate lines running simultaneously, Ahmed multiplied both his reach and his profits. For all his arrogance and public bravado, Shahan Ahmed eventually came under the scrutiny of an operation designed specifically to dismantle men like him. The Metropolitan Police had launched Operation Yamata, a long-running strategy aimed at breaking apart London's drug lines and removing those who ran them from the streets. Detectives had already mapped out the growing influence of the Killer network, identifying the 3 phone lines that controlled the flow of heroin and crack cocaine across Tower Hamlets and East London. Step by step, surveillance closed in, with officers collecting intelligence on Ahmed's movements, associates, and the patterns of his business. The decisive moment came on 28th of June 2022, when officers carried out simultaneous raids on 2 properties tied to Ahmed. The first was his home on Stevedore Street, Wapping, while the second was another address linked to his network. Inside, police uncovered large quantities of Class A drugs along with more than £60,000 in cash. Piles of illicit money and packets of heroin and crack laid bare the scale of the Killer operation. But it wasn't just the drugs and money that sealed his fate. Officers seized multiple mobile devices and financial records, giving investigators a direct link between Ahmed and the Killer lines. On those devices was one piece of evidence that stood out more than any other: a video Ahmed had recorded of himself that we have covered in the very start of the case. The recording was more than just a glimpse into his ego. It became a key exhibit in court, proof that Ahmed was not only aware of his crimes, but flaunted them. Operation Yamata had achieved its purpose. The Killer drug lines had been smashed, the devices collected, and the evidence stacked neatly against Ahmed. But before we reveal the sentences that would decide the fate of these so-called kingpins, there's one crucial detail we can't ignore. A gap in the story that raises more questions than answers. One detail stands out when looking at both of these cases. For Helios Narnaj, we know about one courier or mid-level dealer, Dimitri Genie, whose arrest led to the discovery of the entire network. Beyond him, though, there's little mention of the other couriers or safe housekeepers who must have kept such a vast supply chain moving. Hundreds of kilos of cocaine don't travel the country without dozens of people involved, yet only fragments of that network ever appeared in the courtroom. And for Shahin Ahmed, the gap is even clearer. Police described his operation as running 3 separate drug lines, which would have required runners, phone handlers, and stash locations. But still, no arrests of those middle-level figures have been reported. All the focus was on Ahmed himself. It raises a question. Did police truly dismantle the network, or did they simply remove the most visible face of it? In both cases, the headlines celebrate the capture of a kingpin or a self-proclaimed street boss. But the day-to-day trade of heroin and cocaine depends on the people working beneath them. Without more arrests on that level, can we really say the network was destroyed? Or was it simply disrupted until someone else stepped in? What do you think? Did the police strike at the heart of the problem, or did they only take down the men at the top while the machinery underneath kept turning? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. On December 14th, 2023, at Gloucester Crown Court, the culmination of one of Gloucestershire's biggest drug prosecutions came to an end. Prosecutors laid out the case with all the evidence that had already been covered earlier, which painted Narnaj as the chief architect of the operation. The defense tried to distance him from the crimes, claiming that the incriminating messages on the encrypted phones did not belong to him, and that he was merely holding devices for others. But the jury was unconvinced due to the overwhelming evidence against him. Judge Rupert Lowe dismissed the defense as ludicrous and transparent lies, noting that Narnaj had been the chief organizing mind and the big boss of a network that pushed devastating quantities of Class A drugs across the country. He reminded Narnaj that his choices had not only enriched him, but also destroyed lives and put his own family at risk of losing him for decades. In the end, the sentence was severe. Helios Narnaj, 37, of Smuggler's Way, Wandsworth, London, was jailed for 24 years for his role as ringleader of the conspiracy. Some reports also confirm that Dimitri Genie was sentenced to more than 10 years in prison, whereas 3 months earlier, on September 13, 2023, at Snaresbrook Crown Court in East London, prosecutors delivered their case against Shahin Ahmed, 34, on all the evidence police gathered, along with the videos seized from Ahmed's devices. Unlike Narnaj, Ahmed mounted little in the way of a defense. Judge, reflecting on the scale of his arrogance, told him that drugs blight communities and ruin lives, and that Ahmed's brazen celebration of his crimes showed a chilling disregard for the misery they caused. The sentence followed swiftly. Shahin Ahmed, aged 34, of Stevedore Street, Tower Hamlets, was jailed for 9.5 years. What do you think about these cases? The loopholes police may have left, and the sentences that were handed down? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you want more raw UK crime stories like this, subscribe to UK Crime Documentaries and hit the bell so you don't miss the next case. Thursday, June 21st, 2018. At around 3:14 p.m, a nursery pickup in Richmond seemed like a normal afternoon. A mother walked her 3-year-old son down a quiet residential road, but before they could reach the corner, something unusual happened. 2 mopeds pulled up with 4 men in total. 2 remained seated. 2 got off and began walking. What followed sparked a national outcry, a turning point in what many had started calling a wave of moped terrorism across London, and it moved everything into high gear. This is the story of a moped gang that terrorized London's businesses and families, and how police began dismantling a complex web of violent and calculated operations. By the end of 2017, moped-enabled crime in London had reached levels never seen before. The offences were fast, frequent, and increasingly violent. In some boroughs, residents were being targeted more than once a day, at bus stops, in parks, outside schools, even sideways, and in traffic. Victims were often blindsided. They didn't hear the mopeds coming until it was too late. Phones were the most common target, but not the only one. Luxury watches, designer bags, laptops, anything that could be sold quickly was taken. Riders would mount pavements and weave between cars. They wore masks, helmets and gloves, rode without plates, and vanished before patrols could catch up. In many cases, the response time wasn't fast enough to even begin a pursuit. Police faced a legal dilemma. Pursuing moped suspects through busy streets carried the risk of serious injury or death. Officers were criticized for backing off, but also warned not to cause fatal collisions. The result was a tactical gap that organized crews were quick to exploit. The crime wave wasn't limited to one area: Islington, Camden, Hackney, Westminster. Borough by borough, the numbers grew, and so did the fear. People began avoiding certain streets. Schools warned parents to stay alert. Even local businesses reported a rise in aggressive thefts targeting delivery drivers. Among the chaos, a smaller crew stood out. They weren't loud, they didn't go viral. Their attacks were quiet, structured, and unusually well-timed. Each hit followed a pattern. Same boroughs, similar timings, near-identical exits. And over time, detectives began to piece together something different about their movements. In February 2018, a covert operation was launched to monitor them. No raids or arrests, just silent surveillance. It was called Operation Fieldhouse. And from the start, it had one instruction: let them run, and mapped out their each point. On New Year's Eve, 2017, while much of the city prepared to ring in the new year, a stolen black Range Rover reversed through the glass frontage of a shop on Kensington High Street. The target was Ultimus, a high-end outdoor clothing store specializing in brands like Canada Goose and Moncler. Within minutes, multiple individuals wearing masks and gloves stormed the premises. They moved with speed, ignoring lower-value stock and heading straight for the designer jackets. By the time officers arrived, the shopfront was destroyed and tens of thousands of pounds in merchandise had vanished. It wasn't the first time that area had seen ram raids, but this one was unusual for its precision. The timing, location, and product selection all pointed to preparation. The value of the stolen items, Canada Goose and Moncler jackets retailing between £900 and £1,500 in late 2017, suggested a clear plan for resale through illicit markets rather than a spontaneous smash and grab. For police, it raised questions about whether this was an isolated event or the start of a coordinated campaign. Less than a month later, they had their answer. The same store was hit again. This time, a security guard was present. When he tried to intervene, the group turned violent. He was left unconscious in the street with serious injuries, later requiring hospital treatment and long-term support. CCTV confirmed what detectives had started to suspect, that this wasn't the work of a random gang, but a structured crew willing to return to the same target even under increased risk. The second raid confirmed the pattern. Same method, same stolen vehicle approach, same categories of high-value stock. For investigators watching under Operation Fieldhouse, it marked a shift in tone, no longer just fast robberies, but deliberate, high-yield attacks carried out with force if needed. Still, officers made no arrests. The surveillance remained quiet. They were still building the case. By the spring of 2018, the gang had grown confident. Their raids had so far gone unpunished, and their ability to strike in high-footfall areas without leaving forensic evidence gave them an edge. But on Thursday, March 22nd, their method brought them to national attention, not because of a high-value haul, but because of a target that was almost untouchable. That morning, technicians were preparing Putney Bridge for the Oxford and Cambridge boat race. Fixed high above the Thames, specialist BBC cameras, some valued at more than £170,000, had been rigged to capture the event. At approximately 10:30 a.m, traffic slowed on the bridge. 2 mopeds pulled up, blocking a lane. 4 men dressed head to toe in black with full-face helmets dismounted. One carried an angle grinder, another gripped a length of metal. Their aim was simple: cut the camera down, secure it on the back of a bike, and vanish into the flow of London traffic. It was a plan they had used before on other targets. But this time, there was an unexpected presence. Off-duty Metropolitan Police Officer Stephen Wagstaff, walking nearby, saw the men working on the rig. Without backup, he moved towards them, calling out in an attempt to halt the theft. One of the riders accelerated towards him, striking out with a boot. Another threatened to stab him. The officer's intervention forced them to abandon the attempt. Traffic was still moving. Too many witnesses had gathered. The gang remounted and rode away empty-handed. But their frustration didn't last long. Less than an hour later, they struck again, this time on Lonsdale Road near Barnes Bridge, and this time they succeeded. The £180,000 camera was gone within minutes. Terry Marsh was not the sort of man whose face was known outside certain corners of West London. There were no brash displays of wealth, no public feuds, no online trail of threats or bravado. His power came from a different kind of presence, one built in silence. Every operation he oversaw ran with the precision of a military exercise. Marsh was 32 years old and based in Fulham. Over the course of more than a year, he built and directed a crew capable of moving quickly across boroughs, targeting high-value goods and disappearing before police could react. The tools of his trade were not just mopeds and bolt cutters, but communication systems designed to leave nothing behind. At any one time, Marsh had at least 3 different mobile phones in rotation, each linked to a set of 20 different SIM cards. They were swapped constantly, preventing tracking through call data. Timings were never left to chance. Targets were surveyed, escape routes mapped, and strike teams assembled with specific roles. Marsh divided responsibilities with care. Riders, lookouts, blockers, and collectors all knew their place in the sequence. This was not a street-level operation. It was structured, layered, and rehearsed. By February 2018, his name, though still unknown to the public, was beginning to circulate in police intelligence reports within Met Police's Operation Fieldhouse. But Marsh wasn't working alone. Behind every raid, every perfectly timed escape, was a crew, each man chosen for a specific role and every move rehearsed in silence. When police surveillance began, linking the same mopeds, the same movements, and patterns of attack, one name stood out at the center: Terry Marsh. But he was never alone. Around him was a tight, disciplined group of 11 others, each bringing a different skill to the operation. Kyan Taylor, 19, from Ealing, worked as a driver and technical operator. He handled mopeds under pressure, navigating blocked roads, oncoming traffic, and rapid getaways. His role often placed him at the center of the chase, using speed and precision to evade capture. Omar Tarfat, 20, from Westminster, was known for his role in violent robberies. When a target needed intimidation or a show of force, Tarfat was often present, a visible enforcer, prepared to escalate if a victim resisted. Josh Strong-Mears, 19, from Shepherd's Bush, took positions as both a rider and a lookout. He monitored approaches, kept track of police presence, and signaled when the team needed to move. The remaining 8 men came from varied parts of the capital: Battersea, Ealing, Fulham, Lambeth, and beyond. Some acted as blockers, using mopeds to cut off traffic during an escape. Others carried tools like angle grinders, bolt cutters, and sledgehammers. A few specialized in the storage and transport of stolen goods, ensuring that high-value items disappeared quickly into the resale network. None of them left obvious traces. Across dozens of jobs, no DNA was recovered at the scenes. For months, they operated in the open, confident that anonymity and speed would keep them safe. It was mid-morning in London's West End when the first hit unfolded. 6 men in black motorbike leathers roared down Oxford Street, their route cutting straight through the crowd towards Watches of Switzerland. A red moped was driven directly into the shop's glass doors, a battering ram on 2 wheels. In seconds, smoke and shattered glass filled the air. 2 men squeezed inside, ransacking display cases of high-end watches. Outside, 2 to 3 stood guard with a machete, pacing the pavement, scanning for anyone brave or foolish enough to intervene. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving sledgehammers abandoned on the floor and the store stripped of thousands in stock. Just weeks later, another strike brought an even darker edge. On Bond Street, 3 mopeds arrived at speed. The weapons this time were sledgehammers, an axe, and most chilling, a bottle of noxious liquid. In June 2018, London's moped crime crisis reached a new level of visibility when comedian Michael McIntyre became a victim. At around 2 p.m, he was parked outside a North London school waiting to collect his 10-year-old son. 2 riders dressed head to toe in black pulled alongside his £120,000 Range Rover. One swung a hammer into the driver's side window, striking it repeatedly until the glass gave way. With the child still in the passenger seat, McIntyre was forced out of the vehicle. A knife was brandished, and within seconds his £15,000 Rolex was torn from his wrist. The gang sped off before police could respond. Witnesses said the attack was over in less than half a minute, leaving the comedian visibly shaken as he comforted his son. The brazenness of these crews wasn't limited to celebrity targets. The following month in Manchester, a separate moped gang tried to steal a motorbike worth around £4,000 outside the university in broad daylight. Students sheltered in a nearby cafe as one of the men attacked the bike's lock with bolt cutters. When the lock resisted, he switched to smashing it, all while his accomplices made gunshot gestures towards onlookers filming the scene. Campus security arrived before the thieves could break it free, forcing them to abandon the attempt and flee. The bike was left damaged but intact. Its owner later said the incident left them unwilling to ride in the city again. On Thursday, 21st June 2018, just after 3 p.m, a quiet residential road in Richmond became the scene of one of the most disturbing moped incidents recorded that year. A mother was walking her 3-year-old son home from nursery when 2 mopeds carrying 4 men approached. 2 stayed mounted, 2 stepped off. One man grabbed the boy's arm. The demand was simple, the mother's ring, but the message went further. The presence of the child was leverage, a way to ensure compliance without resistance. In the chaos, the mother broke free, pulling her son into the road and into the path of oncoming traffic to escape. The men soon leaving empty-handed. The attack might have been just another entry in London's spiraling moped crime statistics, but this one was filmed. CCTV footage showed the whole incident. The video was picked up by national media after being posted online, including by Britain's Got Talent judge Amanda Holden, who called the attackers scumbags and urged anyone with information to contact police. Within hours, the clip was trending, sparking public outrage and questions in Parliament about whether enough was being done to combat what some MPs were now calling moped terrorism. The Richmond incident was significant for more than its shock factor. Police inside Operation Fieldhouse, already months into covert monitoring of a linked West London crew, watched the footage with interest. The escalation in tactics, from property-focused robberies to a direct threat involving a child, hinted at a shift in approach. Whether the suspects were the same or from a different crew, the effect was the same. On Monday, 7th May 2018, London witnessed one of the most dangerous moped pursuits the Metropolitan Police had ever recorded. It began in the early afternoon when a 2-stolen moped, carrying 3 men in helmets and gloves, was spotted weaving through traffic in Westminster. Officers moved in to intercept, but the riders had other plans. For the next 90 minutes, they tore across the capital, cutting through 10 boroughs in a relentless attempt to escape. They mounted pavements, forced cars aside, and at one point rode the wrong way down the A40, narrowly missing oncoming traffic. They weren't just fleeing, they were documenting it. Footage later recovered showed them filming parts of the chase on a phone, laughing as sirens grew louder behind them. The ride was anything but random. Along the route, they slowed only once, at a pre-arranged location where an associate was waiting. From the roadside, a can of petrol was handed over in seconds, refueling them mid-pursuit and allowing the chase to continue. It was a sign of planning and communication far beyond a panicked escape. Through central London, past landmarks, and into dense residential streets, the pursuit continued. Police units coordinated to contain them, but the riders' knowledge of backstreets and bus lanes kept them moving. The chase ended only when the moped crashed in South Ealing, but still they ran for escape. But one by one, all three were taken down. Phones were seized, later revealing links to multiple high-value robberies under investigation by Operation Fieldhouse. It was the kind of break detectives had been waiting for, a rare moment when both suspects and evidence were caught together. By July 2018, months of silent monitoring under Operation Fieldhouse had built a picture so detailed that detectives could predict the crew's movements almost to the minute. Every so-called burner phone, every SIM card swap, every brief call, all of it left traces. Separately, the fragments meant little. Together, they revealed the full structure of the gang. Patterns emerged. The same handsets moved between the same boroughs, often in line with reported thefts. Numbers went live minutes before a hit, then disappeared until the next job. Phones placed in different hands still travelled the same routes, from staging areas in West London to high-value targets in central districts. By mid-July, the surveillance phase was over. Arrest teams were briefed, addresses confirmed, and warrants prepared. In a coordinated series of raids across Fulham, Ealing, Westminster, and Shepherd's Bush, officers moved before dawn. Marsh was taken first, pulled from a flat in Fulham without a word. Others were caught still in bed. Some tried to run but were blocked at both ends of the street. The searchers pulled together the physical evidence the investigation had lacked. 12 stolen mopeds were recovered, many with tampered plates or fitted with false ones. Around £6,000 in cash was found, along with bolt cutters, sledgehammers, angle grinders, and clothing seen in CCTV from earlier jobs. Items from multiple robberies were traced back to victims, strengthening each charge. The most decisive blow came from mobile data. Cross-referencing location logs with police incident reports, detectives mapped who was where during each offence, linking not just the riders, but the planners, blockers, and handlers. It tied the network together in a way no single witness could. With the evidence locked in and the gang in custody, the case was ready for court. The months of letting them run had paid off. When the case finally reached Kingston Crown Court, the scale of the operation was laid bare. Over months of testimony, CCTV clips, phone data charts, and victim statements, prosecutors walked the jury through a campaign of thefts, ram raids, and violent robberies that had stretched across London and beyond. Judge Jonathan Davies told the defendants their crimes had caused fear and harm far beyond the financial losses, noting that many victims were targeted in public spaces in front of their children, or while going about their daily routines. He described the Richmond child threat incident and the attack on comedian Michael McIntyre as examples of the brazen and corrosive nature of their offending. Terry Marsh, 32, from Fulham, was described as the architect. He received the longest term, 13 years and 2 months for conspiracy to commit robbery, conspiracy to steal, and handling stolen goods. Kean Taylor, 19, from Ealing, received 9 years and 4 months imprisonment for the elite getaway driver and technical operator on mopeds. Omar Tarfat, 20, from Westminster, was given 8 years and 5 months for violent robberies in which victims were threatened and injured. Josh Strong-Mears, 19, from Shepherd's Bush, received 8 years for his role as a rider and lookout. Stephen Weller, 36, from Ealing, participated in high-value raids and camera thefts, was sentenced to 6 years and 7 months. Aaron Pask, 27 from Westway, handled stolen goods and supported burglary operations. Received 6 years and 8 months. Scott Lever, 25 from Lambeth, part of burglary teams, jailed for 4 years and 8 months. Enter John McFadyen, 24 from Feltham, participated in the Richmond child threat incident, sentenced to 2 years and 8 months. Isaac McFadyen, 19 also from Feltham, present with John during the Richmond Incident, also sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in a youth offenders institute. Ram Monk, 23, convicted and given 2 years and 8 months. Mitchell Lever, 25 from Battersea, received a 12-month suspended sentence and curfew for conspiracy to burgle. Ryan Moran, 26 from Fulham, involved in handling stolen goods, handed a 24-month suspended sentence with conditions. By the end of sentencing, every core member of the Fieldhouse network was either in custody or under strict license conditions. What do you make of this case and the sentences handed down? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Friday, 30th August 2024, around 12 p.m. The street was crowded with people crossing in every direction near Oxford Circus. Among them was Sofian Hadar. He wasn't moving with the flow of the crowd. Instead, he followed one man closely, a tourist and a heart surgeon visiting from Egypt. Hadar's attention stayed fixed on the man's pocket. Then he reached in, took the phone and tried to walk away. He didn't get far. 2 plainclothes officers closed in fast. No warning, no time to run. Seconds later, he was face down on the pavement, officers on top, the stolen phone on the floor. He didn't know it, but they'd been watching him for minutes. This is the story of how London's busiest streets and roads became prime hunting ground, and how Met Police's undercover officers started striking back. In London, mobile phones don't just go missing, they vanish. The scale is almost unbelievable. In the last year alone, nearly 80,000 phones were stolen across the capital. That's the equivalent of 1 phone every 7 minutes, more than 200 a day. Together, they carry an estimated street value of £50 million. This isn't a crime hidden in dark alleys. It happens in plain sight, on buses, at cafe tables, on crowded pavements, even as people step out of the underground. For victims, there's no warning. 1 second, the phone is in their hand, the next it's gone. Certain boroughs have become hotspots. Westminster is at the top of the list. More than 13,575 phones stolen in just 12 months. A 23% rise compared to the year before, making it the most dangerous part of the country for phone theft. Lambeth, Camden, Hackney and Southwark are not far behind. The pattern is clear. Areas filled with tourists, commuters and constant footfall are prime hunting grounds. The methods are swift and silent. Gangs operate on mopeds and high-powered modified e-bikes, weaving through traffic with precision. Riders often wear balaclavas or helmets, concealing their faces as they strike. A single hand reaches out, snatches the phone, and within seconds they are gone, swallowed by the city's endless movement. What makes this epidemic more serious is what happens after the theft. Inside each device lies far more than a replacement cost. Bank accounts, personal photographs, social media, even digital IDs. Once accessed, the value multiplies. Some victims lose their savings in minutes. Others watch as their stolen phone resurfaces on the other side of the world. The majority of targets are iPhones. Police say up to 80% of stolen handsets are Apple devices, chosen because of their high resale value and demand in overseas markets. Step outside these hotspot areas and the contrast is striking. In rural counties like North Caysteven in Lincolnshire, reports of theft are almost non-existent, just 3 cases per 100,000 people. The divide is stark. In central London, phones vanish daily in their thousands. In much of the rest of the country, it barely registers at all. London now accounts for a significant share of Europe's stolen phones, far more than any other city. For gangs, it's low risk, high reward. For the capital, it has become an epidemic. And for the Metropolitan Police, it is a battle they cannot afford to lose. By 2024, videos of e-bike gangs grabbing devices in seconds filled social media feeds. The backlash landed directly on London's mayor, Sadiq Khan. Critics accused him of letting phone theft spiral into an epidemic. Headlines described the capital as the phone-mugging capital of Europe. Khan responded by promising a crackdown. Met deployed more undercover and plainclothes officers in the worst-hit boroughs. This wasn't random policing, it was targeted. Intelligence-led patrols were sent into Westminster, Camden, Hackney and Southwark, the hotspots identified by crime maps and data analysis. Alongside the policing effort, technology companies were pushed to act. In 2024, Google introduced new software for Android phones designed to make stolen devices completely useless to thieves. The update included a theft detection lock, which uses AI to sense when a phone is snatched and locks it instantly. An offline device. Lock keeps the phone secure even if thieves try to cut internet access, while enhanced factory reset protection stops criminals from wiping the handset and selling it on. Together, these features made it far harder to reset or resell a stolen phone, cutting into the resale market gangs relied on. Sadiq Khan hailed it as an important step in breaking the business model of phone crime, though critics argued software alone would not solve a crisis happening daily on London streets. The Met confirmed that more than 750 stolen phones had been recovered in the first half of 2024 alone. Many of those recoveries came directly from these undercover operations. Detectives used not just manpower, but technology, tracking phones through Find My iPhone data, intercepting devices as they were moved to shipping hubs, even disguising themselves among tourists on Oxford Street to lure gangs into making a move. It was a tactical shift, a move from reactive policing to proactive hunting. But it wasn't just about catching a thief in the act, it was about gathering surveillance, building intelligence, and using each arrest to expose the wider network, tracing phones beyond the street snatch and into the supply chains moving devices abroad. In his own words, Khan called it part of delivering a new Met for London. A policing plan, he says, will be smarter, more visible, and more responsive. For critics, the measures came too late. But for the plainclothes officers now patrolling alongside tourists and commuters, it was the only way forward. Zakaria Sanajki never snatched a phone himself. He didn't circle the pavements on a bike or push through the crowds on Oxford Street. His work began once the theft was done. Police said more than 5,000 stolen phones passed through his hands, each one logged, wrapped, and prepared for shipment. His Cricklewood base operated less like a criminal den and more like a logistics hub. Phones were stacked, labeled, and readied for export as if they were legitimate cargo. Sanajki's reach stretched far beyond London. Working with his lieutenant, Ahmed Abdelhakim Belhanafi, the pair moved devices across Europe and North Africa. Phones stolen in Westminster were traced abroad, with investigators confirming Algeria as a key destination where many of the devices ended up. Profits were significant. Police noted that once shipped abroad, stolen iPhones fetched far higher prices than in London's street market, making them as lucrative as drug deals, but with far lower risk. For criminals used to risky cocaine or heroin deals, phones were safer, cleaner, and just as lucrative. Detectives described the operation as highly organized, more like a logistics chain than a street gang, with stock moving out and money flowing back through covert channels. Police also warned that the trade was becoming attractive to wider criminal groups, who saw stolen phones as a safer and easier source of cash compared to traditional drug crime. The process was ruthless in its efficiency. Stolen phones were quickly disabled from tracking apps. Many were wrapped in foil or carbon paper to block detection, then hidden inside shipping containers misdeclared as food or textiles. Others moved through couriers or were carried abroad by mules. Detectives soon uncovered evidence that the phones weren't just being sold on London streets. They were being funneled into a far larger system, one that would be exposed in dramatic fashion. For months, undercover officers watched. They weren't just looking for the street thieves, they were following the phones. Every snatch left a trail. Some victims used Find My iPhone to report the last known signal. Others handed over serial numbers to the police. Slowly, a picture began to form. Phones weren't staying in London. As we discussed earlier, they disappeared into warehouses, courier vans, and cargo shipments headed abroad. The breakthrough came at Heathrow Airport. Border officials, tipped off by detectives, intercepted a consignment. Inside were more than 1,000 foil-wrapped phones, stacked in boxes and ready for export. Each one was traced back to thefts in London, and each one linked to the same network, Zakaria Sanajki and Ahmed Belhanafi. By then, investigators had built up weeks of surveillance on the pair. Plainclothes teams tracked their movements through northwest London. They noted meetings with known associates, late-night visits to shipping yards, and countless trips to courier firms. To the outside world, it looked like routine logistics. To the Met, it was evidence of organized crime. The arrests came swiftly. In early morning raids, officers forced entry into addresses in Cricklewood and surrounding areas. Inside Sanajki's base, they found phones stacked in bags and drawers, many still labeled and prepared for shipment. Digital forensics later uncovered thousands of IMEI numbers logged on spreadsheets, a detailed record of stolen stock moving through the network. Hanafi was arrested at his own home. Apart from him, 2 more arrests were made. Nazi Cheraitia, who played a key role in handling and moving stolen phones through the network, and Riyad Mamouni, 25, who helped process devices and move them onwards for resale. Each was another link in the chain that carried phones from London streets into international markets. In total, over 5,000 devices were linked to the network. The Met said the seizure represented just a fraction of the phones trafficked abroad, but it was enough. With the cargo haul, the spreadsheets, and the surveillance logs, prosecutors had the evidence they needed. For Sanajki and Panafi, the game was over. The men who had built an empire on stolen phones were finally in custody. He wasn't a mastermind, nor a man sitting behind spreadsheets and export routes. Sonny Stringer was something else entirely, a frontline thief. Armed with a high-speed Surin e-bike, he prowled through the city of London. One night alone, he stole 24 mobile phones. He didn't need intimidation or violence. All it took was a quick reach, a twist of the wrist, and the bike carried him away before victims even realized their phone was gone. Detectives later said it was almost industrial in scale. The spree was tracked through CCTV cameras, officers following the route of the bike across the square mile. They watched as Stringer cut through alleys, slowed at crossings, and circled crowds. Eventually, the cameras picked him up, retreating to a hiding spot. When officers closed in, they found him with a bag containing 22 stolen phones, the haul from a single night's work. Stringer showed no remorse. He wasn't interested in the impact on victims or the disruption to their lives. For him, theft was simply business. Each phone had a resale value, and in the criminal economy of London, phones were as tradable as cash. Unlike drugs or weapons, there was no need to conceal contraband or fear lengthy sentences. Stolen iPhones moved quickly into the same supply chains run by men like Zakaria Sanajki and Ahmed Belhanafi. Stringer's spree showed a new kind of criminal, fast, opportunistic thieves on e-bikes. For London's police, Stringer's arrest was a visible win, but he was only one rider among many. Near London Bridge, by the river-facing arc of Hayes Galleria, a thief reached in and ran. It was quick, a lift from the hand, a turn of pace, the victim instinctively giving chase. Most days, that's where it ends. The crowd swallows the runner, the phone is gone, and the trail starts cold. This time, an unmarked police car happened to be on the same stretch of road. Officers saw the snatch, swung a tight U-turn, and accelerated into the path the suspect was taking. The footage, released by the Metropolitan Police on their social channels, shows the timing in stark detail. Bumper across the route, doors opening, officers out. The man has nowhere to go. Seconds later, he's on the pavement and the phone is back with its owner. From first grab to arrest was under a minute. No long chase through back streets, no delayed call-out. Just proximity, observation, and a decisive block that cut the escape before it started. For the victim, it meant something rare in this kind of crime. And for the officers, it was confirmation that plainclothes and unmarked deployments can interrupt a theft before the device enters the pipeline. Although it doesn't solve the scale of the problem, but it proves the core point of the Met's approach in hotspots: quiet presence, close observation, fast intervention. When it works, a theft that's usually over in seconds can be overturned in the same time. The crackdown didn't stop with high-profile chases. The Met widened its net, rolling out a wave of plainclothes and covert operations across the capital, from Soho to Croydon, targeting street-level packers, smugglers, and fence networks. Kadi Nasser, 25, was caught in Soho by 2 undercover officers as he snatched a phone. He pleaded guilty and was jailed for 30 weeks. The device was promptly returned to its owner, a rare win in a world where the stolen often vanish forever. In the city, Oliver Brady, 27, was apprehended after snatching a phone from a blind commuter. A City of London beadle, a ceremonial officer, intervened, tackled him, and held him until officers arrived. Brady pleaded guilty to multiple thefts and was given a 2-year and 3-month sentence at the Old Bailey. Meanwhile, in Croydon, Amari Scott, 20, was traced through CCTV and found inside a shop clutching 2 phones. Police described the interception as part of a broader, laser-like focus on phone crime hotspots. These local busts illustrate 2 layers of enforcement: catching the snatchers and dismantling the downstream operations that funnel stolen phones into reseller chains. Another dimension emerged, including multi-device seizures tied to covert work. In a week-long coordinated operation, the Met arrested over 200 suspects and recovered at least 1,000 stolen phones. Plainclothes teams, uniform patrols, phone tracking tech, second-hand shop raids, and intelligence from cargo manifests were all part of an industrial-scale suppression strategy. The use of IMEI tracking, chain of custody analysis, CCTV mapping, and cargo records allowed detectives not just to arrest individuals, but to follow stolen devices from snatch to sale. Some remain out on bail, including peripheral associates, indicating the network's resilience. It highlights the ongoing cat-and-mouse game. For every takedown, others stand ready to fill the void. Every small victory, Nasser tackled, Brady detained, Scott intercepted, is another fracture in the machinery of theft. It's a reminder that public vigilance, plainclothes vigilance, and technological oversight must remain aligned. Only then can London begin to break the cycle. Westminster, the very heart of British politics. Floodlit streets, government buildings on every corner, CCTV on every lamppost. If anywhere should feel safe, it's here. But for Labour MP Chris Webb, the walk home from Parliament turned into something else entirely. A group of masked riders on e-bikes closed in fast. 5, maybe 6. Just a hand into his pocket. And his iPhone was gone. For a moment, Webb stood stunned. An elected member of Parliament, mugged just yards from the Palace of Westminster. But he had one advantage: his Apple Watch. Within seconds, he'd locked the device and started tracking it. The signal pulsed across the map, leading officers to a suspect carrying a bag crammed with stolen phones. Webb's handset wasn't inside, but the arrest proved the gangs were circling even the most heavily guarded part of London. The impact rippled through Parliament. The Whip's office sent out an urgent notice to every MP. Colleagues should be aware that a number of MPs have had their phones snatched within the vicinity of the estate. Be wary when not on the estate. The warning was blunt. If it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. Westminster, a place of armed police, barriers, and 24-hour patrols, had become a hunting ground. This wasn't just about one stolen phone. It was a message. No one is untouchable, not even those in government. Phone thefts can happen anywhere, at any time, but there are simple steps you can take to stay safe. First, awareness. Thieves rely on surprise. They strike when you're distracted, texting, or walking with your phone in your hand. Keep devices tucked away near busy roads or crossings. If you need to use it, step inside a shop or stand with your back against a wall. Second, secure your phone. Both Apple and Android now allow you to lock and track stolen devices remotely. Features like Find My iPhone, Google's Find My Device, and the new theft detection lock. Third, protect your data. Use strong passcodes, biometric locks, and disable notifications on your lock screen. Many thefts don't stop at the phone itself. Limiting access is as important as locking the device. Fourth, know the hotspots. Westminster, Camden, Hackney, and Suffolk record the highest levels of theft. Around train stations, shopping streets, and late-night venues, vigilance is key. Finally, report fast. The Met urges victims to call immediately, even if they think recovery is unlikely. Every IMEI logged, every location tracked, builds intelligence against the wider networks. Your report may be the link that ties a street thief to an international shipment. London's phone crime epidemic may feel unstoppable, but prevention, vigilance, and tech safeguards shift the balance. As police move undercover to fight organized gangs, the rest is down to awareness on the street. In this battle, one rule stands. The harder your phone is to steal and use, the less value it has to thieves. At Isleworth Crown Court, the picture of the network came into focus. This was not random street theft. It was structured, international, and deliberate. Zakaria Sanajki, 31, described by detectives as the head of the operation, received the heaviest penalty, 8 years in prison. His lieutenant and the right-hand man, Ahmed Abdelhakim Belhanafi, was handed 4 years, 8 months. 2 of their key associates were also sentenced. Charatia from Acton was convicted of conspiracy to receive stolen goods and possessing an ID document with improper intention. He was sentenced to 3 years and 5 months, whereas Mamouni, 25, from Notting Hill, was convicted of conspiracy to receive stolen goods and sentenced to 2 years and 8 months. On the front line, prolific street thief Sonny Stringer was sentenced to 2 years. The judge told him his crimes symbolized the speed and brazenness of a new kind of offender. Meanwhile, on the streets, Kadi Nasser, 25, pleaded guilty and was jailed for 30 weeks. Then, the 2 asylum seekers, Youssef Garef and Amin Abdelkader, were also convicted. Abdelkader was handed a 2-year community order and Garef was given a 3-year community order. Both will have to complete 150 hours of unpaid work and 40 hours of a rehabilitation activity requirement. They will also be subject to a 6-month curfew between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. and must reside at the Home Office Asylum Centre in Islington. Oliver Brady, 27, of Edmonton, was jailed for 2 years and 3 months at the Old Bailey. Amari Scott, 20, received 4 years imprisonment after CCTV captured him. And then there were the quick arrests, like Sofian Hadar, caught red-handed near Oxford Circus after stealing from a tourist. He pleaded guilty and received 11 months in prison. What do you think about the sentences and the case itself? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more true UK crime stories told exactly as they happened, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on. There's always another case to uncover.